Are you in search of a powerhouse opening strategy that not only secures victories, but leaves your adversary reeling in despair at the chessboard? This Gambit is a true force to be reckoned with, yet it remains a well-kept secret, likely because it's considered one of the most audacious and unconventional openings ever conceived in the world of chess. If your goal is to delve into the intricacies of dismantling your opponent's spirit in an audacious and unapologetic manner with no regard for traditional ethics and values, as your sole focus is ruthless victory and a crushing sense of humiliation for your adversary, then the King's Gambit is precisely what you've been seeking. The classic e4, e5, and here comes the bombshell, f4, the King's Gambit. Obviously, black is going to take, right? But take a look at that. Black isn't in the mood for gift exchanges, so they bring out their bishop, blocking white's castling dreams. The knight steps out, multitasking like a pro, defending against a potential queen check and having a stare down with the e5 pawn. Black, not one to shy away from complications, defends the pawn. And now white sets the stage with c3, getting ready for the showstopper d4. d4, the cornerstone of the King's Gambit. Black knows the drill and tries a sneaky maneuver. Queen to e7, indirectly putting the screws on that d4 pawn. But as expected, white goes for d4, creating a juicy trade opportunity. Pieces go off the board, takes, and finally, black snatches an extra pawn with a check. Now, white has a couple of ways to block the check, either with the queen or the bishop. But oh, plot twist! White pulls a little stunt, moving the king and saying goodbye to castling privileges. Seems a bit questionable, right? But wait, white has a cunning trap up their sleeve, and we're about to see black fall right into it. The bishop, feeling the heat, retreats like a pro. And here's where black hits the panic button. Can you spot the winning move for white? It doesn't matter how black responds. If black blocks with any of these pieces, then rook to e1, and it's like a tragic love story. The king hides behind the queen, who has to make the ultimate sacrifice for her king. White is sitting pretty. Now, even if after this cheeky bishop check, black decides to move the king away, white still plays rook e1. After the queen shuffles around, the rook takes center stage, giving the king a reality check. And that's a cold, hard checkmate. Ouch. Alright, let's try a different variation. This time, in the King's Gambit accepted line, white kicks things off with the stylish knight to f3, and black promptly defends their pawn. White can't gobble it up because it's got a bodyguard, the queen. So white decides to get their bishop into the game. Black, not one to back down, reinforces their pawn and builds a pawn chain that looks pretty darn sturdy on the king's side. White, though, has other ideas and takes a stab at breaking the chain by attacking the g-pawn, but black says, "Not on my watch," and pushes that pawn up the board, making it clear they won't be pushed around. If white takes, black just calmly takes back, getting rid of those doubled pawns and keeping a rock-solid pawn structure. But here's where it gets interesting. White's playing on a different plane altogether. Can you fathom the move white makes here? Take a wild guess. Hold on to your seats because white goes for a jaw-dropping knight sacrifice. Knight to e5. White is threatening all kinds of chaos here. They can fork the queen and the rook, and that's just the beginning. So black, thinking they've got this under control, captures the knight, but that's when white reveals their master plan, and the fun begins. First we have a queen check. The king can only move to e7, so it does. Then comes queen f7 check, and once again the king's only option is to move. Another check, the king scuttles back, and then queen e5 delivers the coup de grace, because that's a beautiful checkmate. The king just got obliterated right in front of its army. It's like watching a dramatic Shakespearean tragedy unfold on the chessboard. Checkmate, your majesty. Alright, enough with the pomp and circumstance, let's dive into the next trap. Black decides to roll with it and accepts the pawn sacrifice. White follows up with bishop to c4, and then black dishes out a queen check, because why not? The knight hasn't even shown up to the party yet. White's king sidesteps the check, and then comes black's bishop to c5. Looks like black's got that let's wrap this up quickly vibe, but white has a different script in mind. First, they push d4, making it clear that the bishop's got to back off. Then white throws in knight to f3, and the queen reluctantly takes a few steps back. But black isn't backing down, saying, "I'm staying right here, protecting this pawn, and I'll keep the heat on your king side." Black goes to queen to g4, and that's precisely what white was hoping for. Now let's see if you can spot the lethal move for white in this position. Yep, it's the cheeky bishop to f7 check. You might be scratching your head wondering, what's white up to? If black decides to munch that bishop, and by the way, that's what went down in the game, white drops the hammer with a brilliant knight to e5 check, forking the royal couple. Oh, and there's a discovered attack on the queen, just for good measure. Now let's say black has a moment of realization and plays something like king to f8. Well, white has a surprise in store with h3 saying hi to the queen and leaving her with only one safe square to go. Now, white can bring out the other knight, but if black gets greedy and grabs the bishop, white unleashes the lethal move, knight to e2. The queen's only safe square is g6. Once again, white plays knight to e5, and now nobody can save this damsel in distress. According to the engine, white is sitting pretty with more than a 7-point advantage in this position. So it's game over. Good night, Gracie. These are all great, but what if you're on the black side facing the king's gambit? We explore this very thing in the next part. White plays f4, but then black whips out their own gambit. The Falkbeer counter gambit with the audacious d5. White obliges taking the bait, and black serves up another pawn on a silver platter. It's like a pawn buffet, folks. But here's where things take a twist. Black introduces the Nimzowitsch counter gambit. White doesn't bite and plays queen to e2, delivering a love tap to the black king. Black, undeterred, snatches the d-pawn and extends a gracious invitation for white to recapture with the queen. White says, why not, and goes for it, unleashing a check. Now black has a few options to block the check, but instead they pull a seductive move, bishop to f6, luring the white queen into their territory. It's like a chess-themed soap opera, and the queen can't resist the drama. Now if you're white, you might be eyeing the g7 pawn, thinking it's an easy snack. Well, in this tale, our hero, a 2300 rated player, takes the bait, but uh-oh, he's just walked into a nasty trap. It starts with bishop to f6. The queen has only one safe square, and that's g3. But here comes the crushing move, bishop to h4. It's like a soap opera climax, and once again, we witness the tragic love sacrifice. And the queen is gone. Farewell, sweet lady. In this King's Gambit accepted line, white starts with a nimble knight to f3 and spices things up by thrusting the g4 pawn forward, creating some fireworks potential. But wait, white isn't following the beaten path. They take a daring route and immediately challenge black's pawn with a bold h4 move. Black retaliates by pushing their pawn, taking a swipe at white's knight. The knight, always up for a challenge, boldly strides to the center of the battlefield. And then the bishop gets in on the action, introducing the crowd to the Kieseritzky Gambit. In this gambit, black boldly offers up a pawn, and white says, why not, and accepts the gracious gift. But then comes d5, another audacious move from black. It's like a sly ninja move, attacking the center and opening up the diagonal for the bishop. But white, seemingly unbothered, just goes along with it. However, that's where the trouble begins. The e-file is wide open and black seizes the moment with queen to e7, delivering a cheeky check. Blocking with the queen or bishop isn't an option because the knight is hanging, so white has no choice but to make way for their king. The bishop, full of zest, jumps into action once again, delivering another check. The king finds refuge on f3, the only safe square, but the assault is far from over. Black continues their relentless attack on the king, this time with bishop to g4, delivering another check. The king has no choice but to gobble up the bishop. But just look at that king dance all over the board. It's like a chaotic tango. The knight then decides it's time to join the party, delivering a check from f6. The king scurries back to f3, and finally, black puts the icing on the cake with queen to e4, checkmate. And that's game over, my friends. Black's king may have danced through the entire board, but it's a checkmate that steals the spotlight. A spectacular finish, indeed. Okay, say we are in the Falkbeer counter gambit variation, and white decides they're not in the mood for grabbing pawns. Nope, they're all about bringing the knight into the picture to guard that h4 square. Black, however, goes for the pawn, and after some exchanges, they extend an invitation for a knight tango. But white isn't in a hurry to accept that invite. Instead, they pull out the bishop, pinning black's knight to the king. Now, here's where things get a bit absurd. Black's knight is in hot water, with two attackers but only one protector. You'd think black would do something about it, but nope, they casually develop the other knight like it's just another day at the office. White, on the other hand, is ecstatic, and they go after the knight like a kid in a candy store. After pawn takes, bishop takes, and voila! White forks the king and rook. Black's bishop steps up to block, and white takes the rook with glee. Now, you might think that black's in a tight spot, but hold your horses. Black pulls off a killer move here, dropping that bishop on g4. And believe it or not, the queen is caught napping. There's no lifeline for her in this scenario. In this position, even the chess engine is shaking its virtual head, giving black almost a 3-point advantage. So from here, it's an easy road to victory. Check and mate, white's queen. Who said queens are the most powerful pieces on the board?